So, to me, the heart of discovery writing is leaning into your curiosity.
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And this is episode 159 of the podcast. It is June 12th, 2024, as we record this. And today we're talking about discovery writing with KimBoo York. Yay. Welcome back to the podcast.
So great to be back talking with you guys. I love it being here. You're great.
Thank you to our existing patrons for believing in our work offline and here on the podcast. You can become a patron of the arts at valerieisan.com/ oh, that's wrong. Sorry. Patreon.com/valerieisan or patreon.com/strange air stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Announcements. Let's see. My 3-story method writing how-to book is out. Focus and Finish, Goal Setting and Strategic Planning for Writers is out. Those are my newest books. I do have a new group coaching cohort starting today. So you can go to my website. There's a link in the show notes to see all about that. But basically, we meet once a week for an hour and get all of your projects done. It's really exciting. It's transforming when you can get all of your work done.
In just 1 hour.
In just 1 hour.
Most of us spend all week trying to get stuff done. You do it in an hour. That's amazing.
And just the camaraderie of having other people around, and it's fun. They're good groups. I like them. So yes, this is the summer cohort starting this week. And what else do I need to say?
I have announcements.
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jump
in. Garden Home Writing Series. I will be speaking on the 25th. That's a Tuesday night at 6:30. We'll be talking about submissions, how to submit, how to get off the slush pile, how to impress the reader at the magazine. So come on out to the Garden Home Library at 6:30. It's in Southwest Portland. I'm also at the Southwest Washington Writers Conference September 7th. Teaching,
excellent,
talking about self-publishing, what works, what doesn't work, what I do different. And this is really fresh. I will be on KBOO Radio on Friday, the 21st of June, talking about memoir, story, the importance of telling your story. So if you are in the Portland area or have internet radio, I think I'm 9 to 10 on KBOO Radio. So
what is the numbers? Or at least the
90.7 FM, KBOO.
90.7 FM. KBOO. KBOO.
KBOO Radio.
Sounds like
it has
our
nothing to do with me. Yeah,
name.
Nothing to do with you.
Nothing to do with me.
It's the station that when you're trying to get to NPR, you always hear it and you're like, oh, this sounds like NPR, but it's not NPR. So you like it's sort of, it's like when you want Coke and you get
NPR
Pepsi or
adjacent.
It's NPR adjacent. No, I love KBOO Radio. I'll be on that show. 9 to 10 on the 21st.
Congratulations. That sounds so cool.
It'll be
that's
fun,
awesome.
I think.
Yeah. You think? 9 a.m.?
We'll see.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. to 10. Yep.
Excellent. Let's see what I had another announcement. Oh, the Writercraft Writing Retreat and Workshop registration is open, and dun, 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 I have decided to try something new. I'm excited about this. I'm gonna introduce day passes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Right? I never thought of it. Just like a couple days ago, I was journaling and I thought, what if I did this? This sounds way more accessible. Some people just can't get away for 3 days for a retreat. So what if I just did a day retreat and take the food off of it, but you still get all of you'd get lunch and you'd get all the workshops, that day, and you can just pick a day. And so if you've got childcare issues or a dog sitter that you can't get, if the reason why you're not coming is because of the length of it, then, or the cost maybe, then you have an option for just going for a day and getting all the goodies. So yay, I'm excited about that. So you can either do a day pass for the Friday workshops, or you could do a day pass for the Saturday workshops and still have the opportunity to be in a gorgeous space with a bunch of other authors and writing or not writing. It is a retreat. So you can just, if you just need to get away for the day and journal or take a nap without the kids bugging you or whatever it is, I'm a firm believer in being able to retreat from your life when you need to. So that's my latest announcement. What about you, Eric? You got a couple more on my list here. Should I say them or you want to?
What do you know that I'm doing that I haven't said already?
Your Black Springs Saga Book 1 is out now. The prequel.
It is out.
It is
Prequel's
out.
out. Probably by the time we do this again next week, I'll have a pre-release for book number 1, Accidental Stranger, sort of proper novel number 1, Accidental Stranger. I am pretty much through a rewrite of the book that comes after that, so that series will be picking up speed. It's been really hard to commit to things coming into summer. It's like,
yeah.
I'm just gonna see. I'm gonna tread lightly on these no school weeks and months and see what happens. Maybe make it to September still in my same profession, but I will be releasing a book soon. Yeah,
that's exciting. I can't wait to read that. How come I haven't read the manuscript for that?
How come?
I don't know. You should tell me.
I'm staying out of it.
Okay.
We should talk about this off air.
You also you've closed submissions on the Caretaker Press anthology, but do you want to say anything about is that your author update or?
It's so great to have a podcast co-host who knows better what you're doing. You meet with her once a week and she's like, "Aren't you doing this still?" And you say, "Oh yeah, right. I guess I am still doing that."
It's good. I keep all the notes over here.
Yeah, I do not keep notes on my life. You do. That sounded creepy.
That's the coaching job, right? I always take notes on.
Yeah. This is actually a plug for your coaching service. This
there you
part
go.
of the podcast. Yeah, we closed submissions. We're now just reading stories. That's kind of all I want to say about that. I had a drink with my publishing partner on Thursday of last week that turned into 3 drinks that turned into 4 drinks, and it was like, publishing an anthology,
but in a good way, I think.
In a good way, yeah. I mean, we've learned
because sometimes the 3 drinks means things are going down.
It's good. I mean, publishing an anthology is hard. It's part of the reason I decided it would be really smart to do an hour discussion about how to submit. Because frankly, there was a lot of submissions that hey, we know you're looking for this. This story isn't that, but I hope you like it anyway. There were so many specific things that we said, we do not want any stories about this topic. I've read 4 of those already. 4 stories that were explicitly outside of the want list.
So I hope you just stop reading at that point.
Well, the first time I read it, this is now more therapy than anything, but it's the first time that something like that happens, I think, is this me? Is this, is this me? And then the second time it's maybe it's them. And then by the 4th one, I'm it's all them. So I got really frustrated after the 4th story. We're a horror anthology, but we were very clear about, we don't want anything mean-spirited. We're not into we don't want anything too awful, we're not into mean-spiritedness. We're into fun and monsters and scares, but we're not into and we got some of that stuff. And I'm whoa, buddy, let's not do this. So yeah, we've been talking a lot about how to do it better next time. Kind of what do we do? How do we create the listing so that people clearly understand what we're looking for? Or we just have acknowledged that maybe this is the way it is. Maybe this is what it's like when you open up to submissions. Maybe some people just say they want this, but I'm going to give them that because I'm a genius, or I don't know.
I think that's the case, honestly.
I think so too.
Like that. Some people are just, pitch it into the wind. They're just, a wing and a prayer. And they don't understand the cost of the people who have to go, like you having to read through all these stories that you're not going to use. It's unfortunate, but I think
that was the spur of the 3rd drink. My partner, who's a very, very, he's a genuine horror is his life. He loves it. And he said, look, I got to the point where I didn't want to read stories anymore because I was many of the criteria we asked for were being spurned, and like he was really frustrated. But we have at least 4 really good ones. I have communicated with multiple agents that I'm friends with and asked them to send some stories if they know some people. So I'm hoping that we've upped the game a little bit. So to be continued.
To be continued. Awesome. Yep. Anything else going on in your world?
I don't know. You tell me.
Your kid is on the second to last day of school.
Yep.
What does he have a bunch of summer plans?
He's got like 4 weeks of camp smack dab in the middle with a vacation. Woo. So like 5 out of the 10 weeks are planned.
Okay. That sounds appropriate, you know?
Yeah.
The trouble is those 5 weeks are consecutive. So there's going to be 3, hair-raising weeks before and 3 hair-raising weeks after where we don't know what he's doing. But we live in a neighborhood now where kids free range. So I'm just hoping I can say, hey, go out, go play. Yep, just go play.
Old school style. Go outside, get some air.
Go ride your bike. Yep.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I don't know. I hurt my knee. Did I tell you this, Eric?
I don't think so.
I hurt my knee a couple weeks ago, and
let me check my notes.
And in the process of trying to favor the knee, I hurt my back. So I've been a couple weeks of not moving too well. So I've kind of humping through that, which I was talking with KimBoo before you came on. Like that really affects a lot of my world that I wasn't really expecting. It's hard enough when you can barely put your pants on.
Yeah.
It's sometimes a little too distracting to get other stuff done. So I'm kind of muddling through that a little bit. I did get invited to speak at the Alaska Writers Guild conference in October, which you did last year, right, Eric?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So I'm sad that we are on opposite conference schedules because I did find in pitching conferences that I think it was you that brought it up. I've noticed they won't book you 2 years in a row.
Right.
It's every other year or whatever, so which is cool for people that are going to the conference. That makes sense. But you and I are off. Like I spoke at the Writers on the Sound, the Southwest Washington, last year, but not this year. And it'd be fun if we could like speak at conferences together. Maybe we should like pitch something where we're both doing
a dual pitch.
Yeah.
I think you should
teach a class together. That'd be kind of fun. Oh, we should do that.
Good idea. You can take the notes as we know, and then I'll just like keep asking you, what do we talk about now? And then you'll tell me, and then I'll say, oh yeah, right. And then we'll do this.
Oh man.
It's a great conference. It's a really great conference. People are really cool. Go to the Moose's Tooth Pizza. It's the best pizza you'll ever eat.
I thought you were talking about Southwest Washington because that's the one I know about.
No,
yeah, it's really good.
Go to the
what is it? Moose Tooth?
The Moose's Tooth Pizza. You'll wait for an hour and a half, and you will not regret it. It was
okay.
Oh wow!
It was beyond.
Well, I'm taking.
I told my family in New York, and I told my family in New York, they're like, "No way, is that really great pizza?" I'm like, "Fly up there and find out."
What are you reading, Eric?
I'm reading a book called Cold Victory by Karl Marlantis. Cold Victory. Really, it's post World War II, kind of, it's espionage in an unexpected location. It all takes place in Scandinavia, and it's really good. It's from the point of view of the American diplomat's wife, and it's fascinating. It's a period of history I'm always really intrigued by. And so this is an interesting take on it. So
very cool. Well, last night I finished Crow Talk by Eileen Garvin. Lovely. Really liked that. And when I finished that, I immediately picked up Thunder Song and was reading through the essays in there. So I'm probably halfway through Thunder Song. I'll probably pick up another one to read simultaneously. I haven't quite decided which one. I did get, I have to show you this. Erg. Look what I
She's
found on
getting some. If you're
eBay.
listening, she's grabbing. Ooh, that's my favorite.
I had to
That's
find
my
it on
favorite.
eBay. Like it's
Oh, yeah?
nowhere.
Okay, why is it your favorite? Now I need to know. Now I'm
And for
curious.
the list or for the people that are listening and not watching, this was
We
David
just did a sight
Mamet's
gag, people who
Yeah,
are
right.
listening. Sight gag on the radio.
writing in restaurants. He's been talking about it for like 2 or 3 years. So I was like, I gotta find this book. And I work in a used bookstore. So every time I go in, I like look in the section. Is it here yet? Is it here yet? Nope.
Because nobody would get rid of it. No sane person would buy that book and get rid of it. I think it's the best book on writing I've ever read because it's David Mamet is, one of the greatest dramatic writers that this country's produced.
Yeah.
And he just has such, can I say F you? Can I say F you?
F you. I'll just
He has
mark
such
it
an
not
F
clean.
you to like the academic acquisition of writing talent. And a lot of those essays are just like, kid, do not go get a master's degree. Go sit in a restaurant, listen to people, just go figure out how to be a person in the world and write about your experience. And I don't know. It was really inspiring to me. That book is part of the reason I did not go to continue with a master's degree. It's why I chose not to continue my education. I hope my mom's not listening.
It's all David Mamet's fault.
She'll have a strongly worded letter for David Mamet.
I'm sure he's gotten a few. Some of those essays or some of the things he talks about are like, man, if I was sitting there and I heard that I just signed on for my master's program and I heard the guy talking like that, I would be really pissed. So it's great. It's great. Awesome. It's really affirming if you are choosing that road.
Very cool. What about you, KimBoo? What are you reading?
I finally got around to reading the English translation of the Nirvana and Fire novel, which is a Chinese novel that the 2015 Chinese drama Nirvana and Fire was based on. And it's wonderful. I love it. And you have to understand, and if I didn't mention this last time we talked, it was deep oversight on my part, because the 2015 Chinese drama Nirvana and Fire is absolutely one of the best pieces of drama television you will ever watch in your entire life. It is amazing. Absolutely one of the top 5 shows I've ever watched. It's 50 episodes of very intense court drama, and has a historical setting, but it's a very Monte Cristo type of identity porn, as they say, revenge, and just it's amazing. And so I've been wanting to read it, and I finally got my hands on the English translation, and so I've really been enjoying that. It's dense, but it's fun. So it's been a slow read.
All right. Let's see. I think that's it for announcements.
I am looking for it. As you are talking, I am looking for it on my library website, and I cannot find it. Oh no.
Nirvana and Fire?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to watch Nirvana and Fire with English subtitles, you can find it on YouTube, and it is also on the Asian streaming platform Viki, VIKI.com.
Okay.
So you can find it in both of those locations. So
we are not affiliates. We're not getting any money for that.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I wish I was an affiliate for Viki.com, because I send so many people there, but it is available on as an English playlist on YouTube. So
got it.
But in terms of the book, is it a hardcover book? Is it red?
It's we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. It's kind of an unofficial translation. So
okay. Well, I guess we won't be putting a link to that book in the show notes. Sorry, y'all.
However, we can put a link to the manga, because they have released the manga version of it.
That's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, the manga version, which is beautiful art. Like, the manga is amazing. So definitely can't fault the manga. It's gorgeous.
Okay. Well, I will put a link to the manga anyway. All right. Well, let's start talking with KimBoo about discovery writing.
Oh, that's right. That's why we're here. Oh,
that's why we're here.
We're just hanging out and having fun.
do you want to, so you were on this show last year and you were about ready to publish this book, I think that you were talking about, or you were in the process of writing it,
process, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you first just tell listeners like what's happened, since we spoke with you last, and talk about your new book, and then we'll segue into the
Awesome. Yeah, the
topic.
last time I was on your show, we were talking about become an unstoppable storyteller, crafting compelling serials. So that was all about serial beats and writing serials, or how to use the serial format to write novel series. And so when I moved on to the next book, which is By the Seat of Your Pants, Secrets of Discovery Writing, uh, that this was more of a passion for me, a personal passion, because I do consider myself a discovery writer, if you want to use that term, or a pantser, which is what a lot of people describe themselves as. And I really had to work to learn how to be an effective discovery writer. A lot of the advice that's out there for people who end up pantsing their stories is, well, stop that and do outlines instead. And I, right. And I've tried. I tell the story of, in the 90s, I had this huge epic fantasy novel idea. I sat down at an Olive Garden, hogged a table in an Olive Garden and wrote the outline for it.
You were writing in a restaurant.
I know. There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Hey, also free breadsticks. Let's be real.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So when I got done with that, I never wrote the story. My brain just figured the story was over. I couldn't write it. I could take elements of it and start writing out from those elements, but I could not keep to the outline. And that happened over and over and over again. And so I had to sit down and had to really say, what is going on here? Why can't I do it the other way that everybody tells me I need to? I know we touched on this a little bit when we talked last time, but fan fiction, when I got back into fan fiction as an adult in about 2007, 2008, it almost snuck up on me in a way. I wrote over 1 million words of fan fiction. And over the course of writing over 1 million words of fan fiction, I came into my own voice and I came into my own process almost unintentionally. So at the point where I was working on my original stories, I stopped trying to do those the way everybody told me I should, and do them the same way that I had been writing my original my original fiction, but my fan fiction. And suddenly whole vistas of writing and creativity opened up for me. I wanted to share that experience and give people who do experience that kind of struggle with between outlines and summaries and discovery writing and pantsing and all these different terms that are thrown around. And that was the genesis of the book, By the Seat of Your Pants. So when I wrote that, I was in the middle of writing it when I was last on this show. The book came out earlier this year, so I'm kind of doing the rounds on the podcast to talk about it. And I've really enjoyed talking with people about it, because I get so many people who come in here with like, oh my gosh, you described my whole experience. You've given me the language and the techniques and a way for me to use this technique, which is what I call it. I call discovery writing a technique, just like outlining is a technique. They can use discovery writing in their own process without feeling shame or feeling they're doing something wrong, and use it constructively. And that was the whole point of the book.
Nice. Well, we said before we started the show that I outline, and I write fairly, they're not hugely expansive outlines. I don't like write 30-page outlines, but I will go to a scene level sometimes and just say, like, this is what I want to have happen in this scene. And if, like, for instance, dialogue comes to my brain as I'm outlining, I'll put that in there, or something like that. So so when the outline's done, it looks like a really snaggletooth Scrivener document, like some of them have like one word scene in it, and some of them have like a couple hundred words or whatever. But that's usually how I start. And I get the 3 C's in there: the conflict, the choice, the consequence, for each of the acts. And as long as I've got that, I kind of feel like, all right, let's just get started. So I don't feel like, I mean, I definitely feel like I'm a plotter, but I also feel like I'm kind of a loosey-goosey plotter. So I don't know if, I mean, we've talked about on the podcast before, like everybody's on a continuum and you fit somewhere between those. But I like what you said about it being a technique. So how could I use discovery writing as a technique in my process?
So to me, the heart of discovery writing is leaning into your curiosity.
Oh,
That
okay.
is what discovery writing is. And as you've given such an excellent example of, that can be big, which somebody like Dean Wesley Smith, who's very famous for his, writing into the dark, pantsing approach, who just starts at the beginning and writes until the end and just does whatever he wants to. Or it can be in smaller moments where you are doing it on a per scene basis or a per act basis, where you're not really sure how that thing's going to go. And so you kind of write it out. You're using the discovery writing technique. You're leaning into your curiosity to try to find out what happens next. And that is why I call it a technique, because it can be used at the big level, it can be used at the small level. I think a lot of writers use it more than they know, and they just don't think about it. Creativity itself is a complex, many splendored thing. So where does it fit in that whole spectrum? I don't know, but I think it can be used at anybody at any part of the process. So that would be my response to what are you a pantser? I would say not. You are definitely a planner. Doesn't mean that you aren't using discovery writing technique in your process.
What about intuitive writers? That's a newer term that I've heard in the last year or so. I'm not actually sure. I mean, I feel like I'm an intuitive person, but like, what is an intuitive writer? And is that just another word for discovery writer or?
Related, Becca Syme actually wrote a whole book on it, Dear Writer, Are You Intuitive? And I highly recommend that one for people, because intuition is not, it's not a gift from the gods. You're not like blessed. Now you've got intuition. Intuition is born out of experience. Intuition is born out of the studying that you do, the experimenting you do with your craft. You learn watching movies, reading books, reading novellas, reading short stories, and you learn all these elements of those formats and those types of stories. So your instinct sort of comes in and helps you direct things according to your intuition. I think most experienced writers have very well developed intuition, some in different areas. Like you have great intuition for dialogue, you have great intuition for, certain types of plot elements. I would have very poor intuition, Eric, for horror. Like I don't read horror, I don't write horror. My intuition level for horror is non-existent. You don't want me writing for your anthology. Right. That would just be a bad idea, because my intuition isn't there. I would have to do it very structured. It would be very stilted. But for romance novels and fantasy and science fiction novels, I have a very strong intuition, because I've just been doing it for so long and been reading it and watching movies and studying the storytelling behind those. So
the intuition comes from study?
I think study and practice.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think so. And again, that's something that Becca Syme argues in her book. Now, she does say that there are some people who are more open to intuition in their lives than others, and that's just, a brain thing. What I will say, and answer your question after that long intro, is that discovery writers lean on their intuition heavily.
Okay.
And I don't think that very newbie writers, unexperienced writers at any age, will write very successfully using discovery writing techniques.
New writers?
Yeah, like I think because they don't have the intuition built up, unless they're very, very talented, unless, they're just a born genius, as we were talking about David Mamet earlier. Like some people just have that click in their brain. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it. It just means they need to understand that it's just another skill set. Discovery writing is a skill set. It's a technique. They need to practice it as they build up their intuition, because I think people who rely heavily on discovery writing lean on their intuition a lot.
Okay. That makes sense.
I think that's where all of that, when you talk about the 10,000 hours, that whole like Anybody can get good at anything if they spend 10,000 hours doing it. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I think when you internalize, I mean, that's what that practice is. You're reading it, you're writing it, you're walking around thinking about your story, you're putting in that time, and then it becomes that intuition that you're talking about. Like, then you sort of know how to.
It's like muscle memory for golfers or athletes or whatever. You know, the muscle memory. There was a post on Tumblr which showed a baseball person guy. I don't do sports, just bear with me.
Baseball person guy.
Baseball guy.
We call
baseball
them players.
player. Okay, thank you. A baseball player, and he's talking to somebody, and this is a famous clip. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. And he's talking to somebody. Somebody hits a ball behind him, and something out of his peripheral vision sees it, and he just reaches up and grabs it. Right? That is muscle memory. That is intuition. That is the whole shebang of just hours and hours and hours of writing. And for authors, I think the 10,000 hours is a much more difficult measure. I run an online Discord membership group called the 1 Million Words Club. And it is for mindset, process, and productivity, because I believe that the more a writer writes, the better they're going to get at writing. It's not an exemption from studying craft or whatever, but I think certainly for me, the experience was once I hit 1 million words, I really understood myself as a writer. So, 10,000 hours of writing, that's kind of squiffy for writers. Like, what do you count as writing? Is editing count? But if you go for 1 million words, you will discover your abilities and your process and your strengths as a writer. So yeah, it's all related to that, I think.
Yeah. I just I don't know. This happens to me all the time. I interview somebody for my job. I start talking to them. They tell me a story. It's always the story before the record button. And then it's like, oh, that's the story I want to write. That's the horror story I want to write. But there's this like muscle memory that starts to, I can know what you're talking about. It starts to go into place, and my brain starts to do okay, what about this works for you? Where do we go from there? What would a person do? What's the expected and unexpected choice? So those things, I don't consciously, I don't get out a list and say checklist, but I'm going through that checklist intuitively. I can't imagine that all has to be from just doing this for a really long time.
Yeah, and I talked to a good friend of mine. She's a performer, and she does a lot on improv. And we talk a lot about discovery writing as a form of improv, because if you want to try discovery writing as a technique, then I say start a scene, get to 200 words into it, and then say yes and, which is the classic improv prompt, right? Yes, and the plane landed. Yes, and the president came down from the set. Yes, and so you just keep going from there, because as you say, it's like you're leaning on your knowledge, and to her case, knowledge of performance, having done improv for 20 years. You can really see that she's tuned in to making those connections, and that's exactly what you're talking about as well. Like you've got the checklist, you've read the checklist 10,000 times in your brain, and so it's just automatic. It's a flywheel. It's just like bing, 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 bing.
I had a screenwriting teacher that said the first exercise we ever did in the class, it was great. He just said, all right, here's the assignment. There's two people in a room. One person has something. The other person wants it but doesn't know what it is. Go. And it was like, whoa, like, how do I do that? But then that became like, I sort of, you do those exercises in your head. Like, what are the expected questions? What are the unexpected questions? Yeah. So take me through this, because my process is always, and again, I don't know where this comes from, but I feel like I know, like, when I have an appetite, like I'll filter 10 stories out. I'll get to the one that I'm like, I want to write this one. This is the one that won't let me go. So how does that work in discovery writing? When you sit down, are you like at the very genesis of a story? Is it like, where do you start? And then where does the discovery start? And where do you start to lean into what you're committing to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I'm going to kind of waffle out of answering it by saying it's different for everybody.
Well, please do.
I do that with Erick all the time.
Answer that one. So I think one of the things that's important to understand, and I'm not saying to you, so that's just the broad general you for listeners to understand, is that discovery writing is not free association writing. A lot of people think that discovery writing means just sitting down and writing whatever comes to mind. But when you think of it from the idea of yes and, or you think of it as the idea of writing into your curiosity, you're already putting up guardrails. Like you said, you have these different ideas and you kind of filter down to the one that really interests you. And then if you're a discovery writer or you're pantser or whatever value you want to put there, you sit down and then you just like, oh, okay, but then what happens next? I don't know. Let me type it out and find out. Oh, this person, went down into the dark basement. Now you see how good I am at horror stories.
There you go.
It's like, oh, how cliched. But he goes down into the dark basement and then what's there? I don't know. Let me find out. And so it's this journey. You're going on the journey through the story, much as a reader would in a lot of ways. Now, some writers see the movie in their head. Some people just write the words. I don't really mean it as like a movie visually, but
Right.
you are just going through those motions of that story because you're leaning into the curiosity. You're wondering what happens next. And that itself puts up the guardrails. In improv, you never say no but, because
Right.
what you're doing is you're stopping the dialogue. And in the same sense with discovery writing is you don't say, well, what should happen next? That's the worst thing.
That's where I get stuck.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck because they're like, what should happen next? What's supposed to happen next? What do all the books say? Or what do all the, but no, it's like, what happens next without putting that kind of expectation on what you think should happen next, just following the curve as it goes around. So it's adventurous and a lot of people are intimidated by it. And I think you can start small with something like that. In my book, I have several different types of exercises that people can do to practice that muscle if they want to try the technique. But it's doable, but it's not free association writing. It's not just sitting down and like writing down every feeling or emotion that comes across your head. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Did that answer your question, Eric?
Yes.
Okay, good. 10 points for KimBoo. Woo!
Well, there's, for me, it's like, and it's interesting to hear the process. And once we get into a process conversation, I drift a little bit because I'm like, okay, where does that work? I'm trying to like
place
figure
it
out
in my
version of
own.
it.
Yeah.
But usually, and I think I do a lot of this before the pen and paper, before the keyboard, is like what I go through all the possibilities until I find the one I'm willing to commit to. Right. And then when I start like down that path, I trust the intuition that if I'm gonna commit to that choice in the story, what comes next, what comes next, what comes next, and then I kind of build it from there.
Yeah.
So
for
I don't
me
know.
personally, one reason that I have multiple stories, because I always have multiple stories going at one time. And I know that drives some authors crazy. They can't do that. I'm the opposite. If I only have one story going and I stall on that story, then I stop writing completely, and that's bad. So I have multiple stories going at any one time. But what usually comes to me is a scene. The Queen's Eyrie, which is a dragon shifter love triad romance novel that I just finished serializing and will be releasing in July, came to me as this climactic scene between the three characters of, it's the middle of a battlefield and there's just drama all over the place. And I wrote about 2,000 words of that scene. I think about 200 words made it into the final version, but for me, the curiosity when I have that happen to me is how did they get there? I don't know. So I have to backtrack. I have to start somewhere and then figure out how they got to that place because I don't have it mapped out. I have no idea. It's going to take 3 left turns in Albuquerque before it comes back around. And that scene's probably going to look a lot different than when I first drafted it, which it did. And so for me, that's how my process works. I always start with that scene. It could be early in the story, it could be the end of the story, but I have to just build around it to get to it. And that's what I don't know because I don't use outlines.
That's really interesting. I'm hearing that all of us write in different ways and have different processes and also are doing the same thing, actually.
Well, that's why I try to stress that
Eric
it's a
does the
technique.
discovery writing before he starts writing. Like it's in his brain. He's like sifting through all the options and following the curiosity and what if this happens and what if that happens. then he goes to the page. You start with an idea and write around it and asking questions, and maybe the words that you write down don't make it into the book, but it's part of the process of getting to know the story or the character. And when I'm plotting, I'm writing stuff that I might take out later too. So I might write the words and then revise and take out, in the editing process.
Right.
So
You're leaving space for that creativity.
not the creativity, the curiosity can happen as a technique, discovery, scene to scene, but also when I'm in the editing process, I think there's some curiosity that happens there too. Like, what would happen if this actually, was in a different order, or what would happen if, So I think the curiosity can continue through the editing process too, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as I stress, it's a technique that can be used. And a lot of people get surprised because I do use outlining. I do. And I do use story beats, but oftentimes I use them in reverse. I will do a lot of writing and then I will go in reverse outline and figure out where I am in order to continue from there. Not all pantsers do that. Some do. Some do reverse outlining. Some do, and some of my stories, especially the shorter ones, because short stories and novellas are not my strength. I don't have a lot of intuition for them. I will use story beats. Now, I won't say what this, if that's a meet cute or inciting incident, I won't say what the incident is. I just know there has to be an inciting incident in the scene and I need to figure it out. And so then I'll write to the beat. And so there's just so many different ways that discovery writing as a technique can be applied to your own personal process.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just keep thinking of the travesty and like the right and wrong and all this. Right. I mean, I just think people are told there's a lot of advice out there that says you have to do things one way and you have to do things another way. Like plotting is supposed to be better for you because I think it's, like you said, it's harder probably for a new writer to do, the really intuitive discovery writing that you're talking about. Probably needs, we need to work up that muscle. But I just hear a lot of people like will come to me and say, I was told I was doing this wrong. Like, what do you mean? What's wrong? Like, what?
Right.
Maybe what's wrong is that you're trying to do it a way that doesn't work for you, and then, it's not like you're building a fence or something where there's certain steps you have to follow, otherwise the fence falls down. You're making up a story. You might just love the ending first.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And have to discover the beginning or whatever.
Yeah, so exactly that.
KimBoo, can you use discovery writing if you are writing nonfiction?
Oh, no.
Or essay or blog posts or
she's got a good answer for this. I can see.
I do, because I do that.
Your eyes are glinting.
Oh yeah, because everybody's like, well, you can't use discovery writing for nonfiction, and in fact, I have a whole section in my book about how you can.
Okay.
Because when I will say that it's going to be a different process, like writing nonfiction and fiction, they're two different processes just intrinsically. So if you're using discovery writing in your fiction, expect it to look different in your nonfiction. What I tend to do is so I'm just going to explain my process for writing nonfiction. And this isn't academic work. Like, this isn't for going in a scientific journal, which has very strict layout and all that sort of stuff. This is the books that I'm writing, including By the Seat of Your Pants. Secrets of Discovery Writing was written using discovery writing. I will generally start with what I think the introduction will look like. And from there, I'll take sentences and start pulling them out into making them sections. It's not quite an outline because I don't have any organization to it, and I'm not really sure where it's going, but I will start with that overview or trying to make an overview. What usually ends up happening is I'm trying to make an overview. What's this book going to be about? What's the introduction going to look like? And then I get 2,000 words into what ends up being chapter 4, right? But right, but that's how I do it. And then I break those out and I start moving things around and I start saying, oh, well, this needs to be better explained over here. And I'm not using an outline. I'm not even using a summary per se, but I am just following the threads of thought using kind of the yes and, oh, if that's true, then what's this? in something like By the Seat of Your Pants or Become an Unstoppable Storyteller, yes, I do have points that I know beforehand that I want to make. And sometimes those will end up being a chapter title, and I kind of know has to go somewhere. But it's in writing it out that I start understanding the organization. Like I can't just sit down and make the organization for a nonfiction book and then fill in the blanks. Like, oh, you have your, your topic sentence and then your literature section and all this sort of stuff. I have to write it in order to know what I'm going to say. And then I can organize it from there.
That's interesting. I've heard a lot of people say, I don't know what I think about something until I write it.
Bingo.
And that kind of dissects it and makes me understand it a little bit better. I mean, I would say that sometimes too, but usually that's more of I was going to say discovery. Oh my God. Discovery writing in my journal, like when I'm processing something, like this happened. What does that mean? And I just keep writing until I understand what it means to me. So
And
I thought
exactly
that's what it
for
meant,
me
but
for nonfiction. But
okay.
yeah, no, that's exactly how I write my nonfiction. Like I have something that I want to say, and then I just have to figure out what I'm really saying and how I want to say it.
That's really cool. And I can see how this would be enormously helpful if you are stuck somewhere or have that ubiquitous writer's block. If you get stuck somewhere, you can use the technique of discovery writing to figure out either where you're stuck, why you're stuck, or how to get unstuck. Any of those things by following the curiosity or just saying like, all right, I know this goes somewhere. Let's just write it.
Yes, that is the answer. Usually I hate to tell people that, but
No,
it's like, no,
but
you
I
need
think
to
that's
write
so freeing though, because I was as a new baby writer, I was in a novel writing class with my local community college. And this was a guest speaker for the instructor. And it was kind of a Q&A at the end of the class. And I asked about writing out of order because, like, I know there's this scene here and I want to write it. And but it's not next. Like, do I have to write in order? Whatever. A question that new writers ask. And he said, you could write it out of order, but then you're just sort of cherry picking. And like at the end, you'll just end up with this big mess and you're not going to have a story. So I, for a while, was like, oh, okay, I guess this is the next in line. I got to write this scene next. And then, so for a while, I let that be my process, which wasn't my process. It was his process.
Which gets back to what Erick was saying about, a lot of people being told this is how you're supposed to do it. It's the only way to make a successful story, which is completely not their own process. And also that's not true. And I talk about that a lot because basically every book I've ever written and all the fan fiction I've ever written was written using discovery writing. So if discovery writing doesn't work, I didn't get the memo. Like,
discovery writing works. That's a great book title too. Someone can take that.
I should have thought of that one. Yeah. So the next person who's expanding on it using their curiosity can totally have that title. That's a good one.
The trouble I think that probably young writers would have with it is that we think of it as outcome. We think of writing as outcome based, like the immediate outcome needs to be a finished product. And I think a lot of young writers miss that point, that the finished product, the first draft is not a finished product, nor is the second, maybe the third. And I think there's a lot of mystery around, getting that. We kind of heroicize like the genius and the perfect, the perfect thing. And I think a lot of people get disappointed because they want that perfect thing to happen right away. So they try to, prepare to get that thing right. And maybe that just doesn't work for them, and
yeah,
the reality is that you're just not going to nail it the first time.
And that's true of everything. But you're right. Writing does have this mythology about it of, if you're a brilliant writer and you do everything correctly and you have the outline and you do it a 3-act structure and you do it this and you have the character arc does this, then it'll be a good story. And that's I'm sure for some people that's true. but for many, many others, it's not, including me. And it's just, it got very frustrating over the years to be constantly, as you said it, Valerie, you were trying to use a system that wasn't for you. And you had to break away from this, thumb, voice on your shoulder going, that's not how it's supposed to be done. And that's, how it's supposed to be done is how you get to a good story. And that's how you do it.
Right.
I think I am going to try discovery writing in my marketing.
Ooh.
And by that, I mean, in my head, I had, or in my planner, I should say, days set aside for, this is when I'm going to write the newsletter, or this is when I'm going to write the, whatever. And either I would miss it or something else got in the way, or I wouldn't write it, or it just seemed like too big of a thing. Like, oh, I've got to come up with this amazing thing to send to my, mailing list. I haven't talked to them in a really long time, so it's got to be brilliant. So they won't unsubscribe,
Take
whatever.
that out of the equation.
All of the things go through my head. But what if I separate it, keeping in mind, first drafts are not the finished product, second drafts are not the finished product. So what if I spent 2 days doing the writing of, you know what I mean? Like the first day I sit down and I just do this discovery, curiosity, lean in. This is what I kind of want to say. I don't know. What should I say? And just sort of like get it out, knowing I am not going to post that. I'm not going to email that. I'm just, this is just the discovery part of this email letter or whatever.
Right.
And then I can have, the next Wednesday or that Friday or whatever, however it works in my schedule that week to do the finished product and edit through it and clean it up.
Just give it a shot. No one's going to get hurt by it. And you could end up with some great copy. And probably what you'll end up with is a lot of great copy that you can parse out and use in different ways. Like, I mean, that's when you kind of take the brakes off and let yourself lean into the curiosity. What do I really want to say? And you're not sitting here, what should I say? What are the people expecting me to say? What does all the marketing advice say I should say? You're going to get some great ideas. You are.
And there it is. It's lean into the curiosity. I think that's the part that like people just struggle with, is that like you need to stay curious about the story until it's done.
Oh, that's so well said. Yeah, that's it. You need to stay curious until it's done.
That's another t-shirt.
Where I lose steam. That's where I lose steam with a story. It's like there will be times when I sit down and I write. Here's what I kind of write it out in beats. I write it out in loose beats. Like then she crosses the creek, and then the storm comes, and so there's enough room for me to discover some details in there, but enough that I know where I'm going. But if ever I get through I'm getting through that, and I'm like, I'm no longer curious about what happens. Like, I'm not going to write that story. It was just an exercise in brainstorming. So I think curiosity is in so many things so important.
It is for me as well. That's happened. I just kind of lose interest in the lead character. I'm like, I don't really care about you. And that story is, as you say, it was an exercise.
And I think there's also this curiosity of like, and this is what not to go back to the frustration around anthology publishing, is like, I feel like when I'm done with the story, I'm now curious what the reader is going to think. Like, what's the reader going to get out of this? Like, what is the response going to be when I send it to my writers group? I'm curious about it when it's done. And when I read something and I feel like the spirit of curiosity is gone from that story, it's really hard to get excited about it. Yeah. So I think it makes for good end product if the writer is still curious about it.
Yes.
And also, I mean, we want our readers to be curious about our stuff too. Yeah. Especially when they close the book and the story's over. I want them to still be thinking about like, what's going to happen after the story ends,
Right. There should be a debate, right? Aren't those the best like movies? And like if you watch a movie with someone and then when it's done, you're talking about like, where did it go after this, or what happened there, or what's the next one going to be?
What was the background story for this character? Why did they behave that way? Like, right. I just saw something from, I think, John Rogers, who's one of the directors for Leverage, the television show. And he's very supportive of fan fiction. And one of the things that he said was that they purposely left holes in the stories so that people could imagine what might happen there, whether it was character backstory or a setting or, you know, something that happened off screen, that he purposely left those holes because he wanted watchers, in this particular case, he wanted viewers to feel invested and have pique their curiosity and leave them room to explore what those holes were. And I thought that was a very interesting aspect of piquing a reader's curiosity, because I love world building, and I do tend to get a little lost in the world building sometimes. But with that in mind, I've been learning, especially for the last couple of years, pull back a little bit, leave holes, let there be places where readers can make their own explorations or their own judgments or their own and feed into their own curiosity, because that's fun. And then, you know,
there's
maybe I'll
a
come back
really
to it
great
later.
story about the film version of American Psycho, which is, you know, I would take it or leave it if you like it, but the editor was having such a hard time in dailies because some of the original shots were so like, it was so clear that Christian Bale was, you know, like there was just such clarity in the characters that he went back to the director and said, look, why don't you direct it like this, which is a big taboo, but he said,
Right.
why don't you get a take where the character is guilty, get a take where the character is innocent, and get a take where the character doesn't know. And then what he did was he took these takes, which were wildly different, and then edited scenes together using all the different takes, so that you'd have a scene where the cops know that he's guilty, don't know that he's guilty, are unsure, and then there's, you know, so there was always this inconsistency. And if you watch that movie, like, if anything it's good at is in the interrogation scenes, you really have no idea who knows what, and it keeps you on edge. And that was only because, like, they deliberately built ambiguity into the story. Otherwise it was just a very certain procedural.
Right. Ooh,
Very cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never watched that because I don't like horror, but maybe I'll have to watch it now just for the scene and looking
Christian
for that.
Bale is an amazing actor, and boy, he plays a great psycho. But
I will warn you that having watched that movie kind of ruined Christian Bale for me.
I can see that.
Very hard for me to watch him in any movies he's done since.
Oh,
And,
I like
even Empire of the Sun, when he's a little boy. Come on, he's a little boy in Empire of the Sun.
Okay, little boy. I mean, yeah, all right, but you know, it's like what did he do? Newsies? Like I'm not sure.
Something like that. Yeah. You're not a newsie. You're a loony.
But yeah, the adult Christian Bale. Yeah, that's be aware. Just be aware.
Maybe I won't.
Make sure you put this in the show description. We close on our feelings about Christian Bale. It'll get the people will listen all the way through just to get to this point.
Yeah, to be clear, I admire him immensely. Can't watch him.
All right. Well, we are out of time. KimBoo, why don't you plug your book one more time or anything else? Tell us where people can find you. All of the deets.
All the deets, as the kids are not saying anymore.
Places.
They're not saying that anymore. I don't know why I just said
that. Well, I am, my website is houseofyork.info. So that's all one word, houseofyork.info. Has links to everything, all my books. The book that we're talking about today is By the Seat of Your Pants, Secrets of Discovery Writing. It does include things like things you can do, research you can make. It's a very hands-on book. So if you're curious at all about it, exercises is the word. It does include exercises to help build your discovery writing muscle. So I highly suggest that one. I also do have, as I mentioned earlier, the 1 Million Words Club, a membership club on Discord, which is about productivity and process and mindset. We do talk about craft, but it's focusing on getting the 1 million words written so you can find your voice as a writer, which I think is so important for writers to do. And otherwise, you know, I'm here and there. I'd love to hear from people. You can reach me through my website and see all my other stuff and other podcasts and links to this podcast and all sorts of stuff.
All right. Thanks so much, KimBoo. It was lovely seeing you again.
Lovely. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you so much, y'all.
Yeah, it's great having you.
All right. Bye
now I'm going to spend the rest of the day thinking about my process. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to take the dog for a long walk.
Follow that curiosity.
Like, what do I do? What do I actually do?
All right. Awesome. See y'all next time. Bye.